you might be the perfect person in the world to talk about a crazy video that I've been puzzling over for the past 2 weeks. And the reason that you might be the perfect person is you're a licensed comedian. You were a writer on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. You now write an awesome political comedy Substack. You also worked at the EPA. Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I was a speechwriter for the EPA for 9 years before I wrote for John Oliver. Yeah. Speechwriter during the day and stand-up comic at night. That's how I got into comedy.
So you know about comedy, you know about the environment. Can you explain to me why the climate protest group, Climate Defense, put out a video where they disrupted a Matt Yglesias luncheon? And the video that they released of the event was somehow the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
All right, Matt Yglesias, we're here to call you on your stance on fracking. Frack, dangerous fossil fuel funded lie.
Stop pollution. Fracking is a false solution. Stop pollution. Fracking is a false solution. You have a son.
Fracking is a
Why
false
does son have a future?
Let's please leave. Let's please leave.
Why do you support fracking?
What is happening?
Yeah, this is the important thing for everyone to remember is that they released the video because in my opinion and in the opinion of many others, they did not come across well. So you're like, this is a hatchet job. No, this is their video they cut together. And honestly, probably the thing that most qualifies me to talk about them is that I live in Washington, D.C. And this is very much a D.C.-based group. Like, in California, you have earthquakes. In the Midwest, they have tornadoes. In Washington, D.C., we have climate defiance. They might pop up at any moment. And they did pop up at Matt Yglesias' thing because obviously Matt Yglesias is the problem, right? And they delight in disrupting things. They're one of these groups that sits down in front of roads. They actually, my wife was at the congressional softball game last year, and they stormed the field and sat in the congressional softball game for a while. It's just a bunch of people in the crowd going, "Who are these clowns?" And yeah, Matt Yglesias got him the other day. Occupational hazard, but I feel like he did extremely well. Two parts he did really well, I thought. The first is he's at an event, he's on stage, he's speaking, and they come up and they unfurl this banner, and it says, I forget, Yglesias murderer or whatever. Well, and his response was just, "Oh no," with a super sarcastic, "Oh no," which was outstanding improv. And then later they were harassing him and saying, why do you support fracking? And he said, do you want to read an article? And I thought, do you want to read an article? It's probably a perfect slogan for slow boring. So I've met Matt a few times. He's a really good dude and I'm friendly with him. So maybe next time I see him, I'll suggest that be the beneath the masthead on slow boring.
To be honest, when I saw the video, my first thought was Matt hired these guys as actors. And especially in the background where they're kind of clapping, clapping and chanting, and they kind of look goofy. I'm just they look like actors he hired to make a fake comedy skit about this thing happening to me.
Yes. If I was writing for a TV show, if I was writing for Veep or one of those shows, and you're like, okay, let's do something based on that. The hard part would be, how do you heighten it? How do you make it more ridiculous than what it actually was? Because they were yelling you have a son at him. It's sort of impossible to make more comedic than it already was, which I think is a bad sign for a protest movement, is that it is impossible to differentiate between what you're doing and what, paid agents hired by your opponents would do to make you look ridiculous.
Yeah, it's probably not a great sign for the efficacy of it. But on the other hand, it's kind of impressive. I mean, you're the expert here, not me, but my impression is that making things that are funny is actually quite hard. And if you sat down to make a very funny video, that would be a hard thing to accomplish. And they seem to have done that not only by accident, but while intending to do the exact opposite of that. How does that happen by chance? Or how is it even possible?
Yeah, found footage is like always funny. You're right that it's very difficult to make this stuff. I mean, the whole premise behind what I do, it's like politics, but I'm trying to make it more digestible and more fun because nobody wants to sit down and read an economist article. I mean, sometimes you do it because you absolutely have to, but if you can avoid it, you'd rather not. They, I really do feel that if you wrote this and casted it, it wouldn't feel quite right. It would feel forced and exaggerated. I don't know. Maybe they are, not an environmental protest group, but like a performance art group that is doing this weird, like Dadaist triple backflip type of thing to discredit the extreme climate protesters. Which, by the way, I do fine with because I'm a guy, like you said, I worked for the EPA for 9 years. I care a lot about climate change. It's important to me. I don't think the craziest protesters are helping the cause at all, to put it mildly. So if they exist to discredit those people, to discredit the people who are throwing soup on paintings and painting Stonehenge orange, then I don't know. Maybe they are so far ahead of the curve that the only problem here is that I don't totally get it.
I think we'll have to wait and see if they come out and reveal themselves to have been conducting an elaborate hoax.
They're geniuses if they are. They're Andy Kaufman times 100 if that's what they're doing. They're legends.
So you came before you were a wildly successful and beloved Substacker. You wrote for late night TV.
Yeah, John Oliver for 6 years.
And how was that? What was that like in those days? And how is it different from what you're doing now?
I question a lot. The biggest difference between then and now is that this is my own stuff. My Substack is my own stuff. When you're writing for a show, the host, or that later I went and wrote for sitcoms and stuff. It's like the host or the EP, head writer, whoever, they get final cut. I get final cut on this. So that's pretty cool. It was a different era because I wrote from 2014 to 2020 for John Oliver. I feel like a lot has changed since then. We were like the last staff to get in through the completely blind packet process. I feel like that doesn't happen anymore. It was a lot of fun. I'll tell you that. It was a ton of fun. I loved it. I'm still, in touch with the writers who were of my generation, and they're good folks. And I don't know. Everyone's trying to figure out like how to make late night comedy work now because that landscape is changing a ton. Streaming is obviously just slowly becoming the thing. Broadcast TV is just on its way out. It's going to take a long time and it probably won't ever go away completely, but it's like not the future. Streaming is the future. And yet everyone's trying to figure out how to do late night on streaming because it doesn't really seem to work. It's not really the case anymore that 11:30 rolls around and you're tired. So you flip on Johnny and just kind of drift off to sleep. So people are trying to figure it out. It's like Seth Meyers had to get rid of his band. Fallon went down to 4 nights a week from 5. So people are just kind of figuring it out. It's perhaps not boom times. But I do hope there's some home for it. I mean, I guess to a certain extent, I found a home for what I do on Substack. Like I said, I just write it and it goes up now. I don't have to run it by a producer. I don't have to get it all the way up the chain. And then somebody at the network says, we can't, no, because of the thing that happened in Tunisia, we can't do that. I can always just publish it. So that was a long way of saying it's changed a lot. Technology really has changed the world, and I don't know where it's headed from here.
I need to come up with the format for what you're doing on Substack. And for people who don't yet subscribe, which you should correct if you're watching this, you write posts that you publish as Substack, but you also record a podcast. What would you call it? It's a podcast where you read aloud some of the posts that you've done, and then also do kind of like an extended riff and section. Like, how did you come up with that format? I love it. I find it like strangely compelling, and I kind of wish more people did something like that.
Well, thanks. The way I came up with it was completely on accident. I didn't plan anything. I mean, I can tell you the very early days of the blog, I was just writing a Last Week Tonight episode. But then time went by and I kind of figured out more it's still basically the same thing. It's like, look, I've worked in politics. It's like the only thing I know. I only know politics, comedy, and soccer. Those are the three things I know. So it's going to be political comedy. I have kind of figured out, it's a little more short form now. It's like quick hits and I kind of have found my lane. As for the podcast, that was completely on accident. It started with me just wanting to have like more content. So I was like, all right, I've already written these articles. I know I always like David Sedaris. I read his books, but then also sometimes he does readings and sometimes you can find like an audiobook and reading it. Like I always like that. So I was like, okay, I've already written the article. I can make that part of the podcast. And then I do 2 podcasts a week. I do that one where I'm reading some of the articles. And then I do another one, which is like new content. I'm talking about some new topic. It's basically a written piece, except I'm saying it with my mouth. Mm-hmm. And then you're right, the opening riff, which is first I play a copyright expired song, talk about it for a minute, and then I read the news from 100 years ago, because you can go on the New York Times and just find old newspapers from 100 years ago. That happened completely on accident. It happened because I was starting the podcast. I needed music. Everybody has this like powerhouse music to get you pumped up for the podcast. And I thought, let me go a different route. Let me do copyright expired, because any song that's 100 years old, you can just use it. So I started with that. That turned into me riffing on that. And then what happened is I ran out of people to riff on, because I've done so many of these now that it's the same people over. It's the Paul Whiteman Orchestra, just over and over and over. I don't have anything new to say about Paul Whiteman. So I started this thing where I read the news from 100 years ago, and that's really fun. As a comedian, it's great to have inherently funny material to riff off of. And everything that happened 100 years ago is funny because nobody knows what they're doing. There's Zeppelin travel and politics. Like the Klan is a big force in politics, and people are like, we're not sure how we feel about the Klan yet.
Right. People are getting canceled for being insufficiently pro-Klan sometimes, and it's all kinds of strange hijinks.
Seriously, because I'm reading newspapers from 100 years ago. So they're going through an election in 1924, just like we are right now, on the same time frame. And it's very dicey for the Democratic nominee, John W. Davis, who's running against Calvin Coolidge, because a lot of people in his party really like the Klan. And he's taking a risk by saying, I'm not so cool with them. And then Calvin Coolidge is like downplaying it. It's insane to see the politics of 100 years ago.
And as you're making this thing, how do you tell what's working?
Well, I mean, you get subscriber bumps. You see, sometimes a piece goes viral, and you definitely notice that in your numbers. Something happens. You see a spike in the line. You're like, oh, something happened. Either it's just, sometimes they go organically viral. Sometimes somebody with a big account restacked you or retweeted you or something like that. So through that, trial and error, you figure out what works and what doesn't. You figure out that writing about electoral systems never works. Nobody wants to talk about ranked choice voting. Nobody wants to talk about the Electoral College. I have a background in economics, so I like to write about economics a fair amount. Market for that's not super big. But yeah, trial and error.
Very cool. Who are some of your favorite Substacks besides your own?
Well, Matt Yglesias we've already mentioned. I mean, I'm glad we're getting the word out about him. He needs more subscribers. I always read Noah Smith. It's all the people you'd expect. It's like all my, normie liberal like favorites. Matt Yglesias, Noah Smith. I always like Andrew Sullivan. I've been reading him for a long time. Jesse Singal and Blocked and Reported. There's Blocked and Reported the podcast, and there's Jesse Singal, the dude who also has a Substack. I read that. Cartoons Hate Her is a new one that suddenly just she's everywhere, and everyone is because she's funny, and funny is good. God, I could go on. Nate Silver, you get the best version of his stuff on his Substack. There's a lot of, and the others I'm forgetting. I'm sure.
I'm totally glued to it right now.
Nate Silver's, yeah. It's like every morning to see what happened.
there's a huge gap right now. I'm nerding out for a second here, but there's a huge gap right now between the Nate Silver forecast, which is basically the election's a coin toss, and the poly market prediction market, which is the biggest trading volume prediction market that's doing this thing. And it's actually a substantial gap. Like I think they have Trump at 64% or something, which is a big, you could make a lot of money betting on that difference if you're confident in it. And I'm very interested. I guess we'll never really know who was right necessarily, because you don't get a resolution that says, oh, this was what 64 was wrong and 50 was right, or something will just happen. But it does strike me as like an interesting moment right now where some of the things that ought to be the best predictors disagree quite wildly.
It does seem like if I was a betting man, and I'm not, it does seem like potentially a money-making opportunity. Personally, I'd go with Silver's forecast over betting markets. I know people are big believers in betting markets. I think they're, certainly good at some things. I read one article that said it's largely a small number of people making gigantic bets on Trump that are driving the poly market thing. So that might be skewing the numbers. That I think is less scientific than Nate's model, which is, he's honed that over close to 20 years now.
Yeah.
I know actually like from Nate's book that the way people make money betting on sports and stuff is if you think there's an inefficiency like this, if you think poly market's at 64 and you think 64 is way too high, you take that bet and you understand you're going to lose it, but you take enough of them that over time you'll win. As a one-off, personally, I'm not prepared to plow my life saving into call Aaron, especially because I want Harris to win, because there's like a double whammy if she loses.
Oh yeah, you don't get the emotional hedge.
I should bet Trump because then I can't lose. It's either good, the first time I wanted to win one, or she lost, but I'm rich now. So
you'll have to record the episode where you're like, this is the worst and the country is doomed, but you got this big grin on your face and you're like smoking a cigar.
I would not do that because I would not want to confront the feelings I would have inside me if I bet on Trump and then Trump won, because I would outwardly be, this is not good for the country. And inside I would be like, oh, okay, hell with the country. It's like I'm getting the beach house. That's awesome.
Is it your piece that I'm remembering about how various late night things devolved into clapter?
Yes, you're probably thinking of one specifically called Late Night Changed Because Opinions Are Easy and Jokes Are Hard.
Opinions are easy and jokes are hard, which I think is very true. I mean, writing something that's consistently funny is extremely, excruciatingly challenging from what I can tell. And it's sort of like a high art form. And it's almost like, I think of it as like there's a degree of seriousness in comedy, kind of perversely, where that you have to take the thing quite seriously if you actually want to do it well. And it made that piece made me wonder, do you think comedy works on Substack? Opinions definitely work on Substack. That's well established. We know that. But I think one of the reasons I'm so obsessed with your Substack is because it's funny, and there aren't that many. And I'm wondering if there's more that we could do to kind of like breathe life into that thing.
That's a good question. I mean, it does work. I mean, it betters my job now. I'm making a living doing it. And I know that, Garrison Keillor is certainly making a living doing it. And if you think about it, it's like, Garrison Keillor and other, David Sedaris, I'm not saying Substack, but like writing comedy, Dave Barry, The Onion, obviously, I think Clickhole is very funny. Written comedy, okay, that's the thing. That definitely does work. You are right that it's very hard. A lot of times when I'm writing an article, it's like I've got the basic structure of the piece pretty quickly. And then there's like a couple hours where I'm sitting around. If you go into a comedy writer's room, many times it will be a bunch of people with fancy post degrees sitting there with their head in their hands going like, okay, it literally like on 30 Rock, okay, we need a funny breakfast cereal. And then they're just like trying to think of funny breakfast cereals. They're like, we need a celebrity who was like big and then they had a downfall, but it can't be too dark. You're trying to come up with those things. It takes a long time and it's really hard. how to make it work better. I was going to say, I always try to make it funny because I feel like that's the value added. When you look at people like, Noah Smith, he's like an academic, and, Matt Yglesias knows a lot of things about a lot of stuff. And the value I can add, you don't need another opinion from me, but jokes are the value I can add. So I try very hard to include jokes. And then sometimes I have pieces that are 0% political. I wrote about Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis last week. Which they don't all have to be political. Sometimes
it's convinced me that I want to see it, by the way.
You should see it. You should see it. It's an incredible shit show. If you like bad movies, and the readers of my Substack know I only like bad movies. If you like bad movies, you must see Megalopolis. It is the event of this generation as far as bad movies are concerned.
But there's some people defending it, right? Some people are saying, "Oh, it's going to be a cult classic."
Yeah. People. The one quote I read, it's very divisive. One quote I read, and I included this in my article, is that somebody saw it and said they saw it at Cannes and said Coppola is like Picasso or Einstein. This is a moment in time. So they liked it, I guess. I'd call that a positive review. My review, I would characterize as not positive. You can read it for yourself.
I think he said we should be embarrassed for inventing the video camera.
Yeah, I said that, yes, Thomas Edison should be. I was embarrassed for the actors, the crew, America, and Thomas Edison for inventing the video camera to begin with. That's my review in a nutshell. How to make comedy do better on Substack? I don't know. I mean, the graphics help. I'm always sure to include a graphic with my piece, and a lot of times the jokes will be graphics. Lucky for me, Chris, I have 3 credits in Photoshop from the Evergreen State College. So, I'm not to brag, but I'm pretty well set up graphics-wise. I don't know. The software works. That's good. A lot of times I need to download a video from Twitter or whatever and upload it so people can see what I'm talking about. So yeah, maybe that's my answer. More to the extent that things can be more multimedia, that helps. But it is nice that the software actually works. And when I go to and upload a video, it does it. That helps.
So glad to hear it. One thing we are doing that I'd be interested in your take on that I think might help is we're building a bunch of things to try to make making clips easier. For if you're making audio and video anyway, the one thing that's kind of like the lingua franca of a bunch of social media is just short clips of things that kind of stand on their own that you could stick in, a TikTok or in a tweet as a media item. And one thing that having done the podcasting a little bit myself and tried to go through the pain of making those things, it's you can do it, but it's kind of a huge pain in the ass unless you're hiring someone to do it.
Yeah.
And so we're in the process right now. We have some of these features where we're helping auto generate some of this stuff. So if you make a podcast episode, you might get back 10 clips, and some of them might not be any good, but a couple of them might be great. And if we kind of make it really easy where you don't have to go and write a bunch of tweets or whatever, but if you're making your content, we can kind of slice it up for you into these bite-sized things that you could put on other platforms if you want. And then that's because people don't really, this is always been the problem with podcasts. It's really hard to discover a podcast because the degree of recommendation you'd have to get from somebody before you sit down and listen to a whole new podcast out of nowhere is extremely high. That's
yes.
Your best friend has to threaten you with death to get you to sit down for an hour.
My wife recommends stuff to me. I'm married to her, and I'm maybe if I'm on a bus or something, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I've read gone through all the other stuff on the internet that I already want. But if you have a 15-second clip that is a good bit or a good thing, and that thing makes the rounds, that actually does work.
Yeah, you're right. And you use the phrase lingua franca, and I think that is the way to put it. That's what it is on social media. It's this short stuff, short clips. You're right that might work as a teaser, and that's essentially what you're doing. When I resec an article, I usually try to pull out a funny quote or write something that basically tells people what it's going to be. Will also be very good for people who are very visual. I'm old school. Back when I was a stand-up, I was like, God, I wish I could do this without performing. I'm not a theater guy. I don't like being on stage. People get a buzz out of it. I don't. I was always like, I wish I could just write this. So I I very much am always going to be the written word, but other people are more visual, and they might really do well with that.
Would you have an AI generated anime cat girl avatar that just reads out the things you write?
You have that in the works? I mean, that's what you.
We didn't, but now that we're talking about it,
I picture that in Substack Labs. They're like trying to perfect that anime cat girl. They're just like, hotter, make her hotter.
hot and funny at the same time. It has to be both.
Yeah, because I've been here talking about like what makes stuff work. And that's like hot girl. Man, I wish I could push that hot girl button because that works. Short story. Back when I was at ETA, I was a speechwriter, but sometimes I was involved in other stuff, especially when they found out that I was starting to make some headway as a comedian. They got me involved in other things. So one thing they got me involved with was they every time we made videos, sometimes they'd like run the script by me, because EPA makes these videos about, how to know that the water where you are is safe to drink,
right,
and what the Superfund program does, and
they're not that funny when they start out.
Correct. They're less funny than you would expect an informational video from a federal agency to be. But there was this one video that was huge. If you like graphed all the EPA videos and how many hits, it's like this one got 1,000, this one got 1,500. There's one about like 300,000. They're like, what? And we found out it was just read by one of our press officers, but it got picked up by a Tumblr who's like, check out this hot girl working for EPA. We just had a press officer who happened to be physically attractive, and that went mega viral by EPA standards. All she's doing, to be perfectly clear, all she's doing is sitting at a desk, wearing normal clothes, reading a video about solid waste contamination, but hundreds of thousands of views. So, anything that, if I could make my blog sexier somehow, that'd be nice. There is that way.
All right, I'll put that on the put that on the future.
Put that on the list. Make everything sexy. Write that down.
Anything else you want to talk about?
How my podcast and blog would be better if I was a 21-year-old beach volleyball player. We covered that. I want to say thanks for making Substack. It really is incredible. When I left TV, I did it exactly the wrong time. I did it right before COVID. It was a tough decision, but like you're either a late night lifer or you're not. And so I decided not. And then right when I did that, global pandemic and everything shut down.
Perfect.
So yeah, so it was a real scramble. And I started writing the blog, and I still say blog. I like the old school term. I started writing the blog just to do it, just because I had to. I'm a writer, and it's like what I do. And I was like remodeling a house, and that was like pretty good. But I was like, this is weird. I'm just a guy who remodels houses now. I'm not a writer anymore. So I started writing it, and it has incredibly worked. So I think Substack's a good place to be. I think when I look at the issues TV is having, which we talked about with, everyone's trying to make the jump to streaming, but some people are doing it successfully and a lot of people aren't, and nobody seems to know how to make money off of streaming. You kind of look at that landscape and you think, okay, where do I want to be? The answer might be independent content creator. So I'm in that world now, and to my great surprise, it's working. So thanks for building the software that makes that possible.
Thanks. That means a lot. And thanks for using Substack. As I say, I'm a happy subscriber at imightbewrong.substack.com. So everybody go subscribe. Thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me up. Take care, man.
Cheers.